saying you must do continuous business as usual. So you must check certain things at certain times, at certain defined periods and intervals. And like we said, PCI mandates you to do it at certain times. ISO and ISMS allows you to determine when you want to do it, but it's important you do it as part of your growth in maturing in your cybersecurity and your management system, most importantly.
Thank you very much. So let me just push you into the next section. And for me, this is very critical because in scenarios where, whether at the brand reputation level or data level, data exfiltration, fraud, financially, but they've complied to standards. So it confuses people a lot. So in their mind, they're like, why do we even really need to comply? Why comply when even though if I comply, I'm not still secure? So my next question is, how do I protect my reputation? How do I protect my brand? This is what let's start on the technical line.
Okay, I struggled to hear the last part of what you said, but I heard the part where it says, how do you protect your brand and reputation, even though you've done this compliance standards and management expects that, oh, you made me spend billions of naira to get a certification and I'm still not secure. I think it's first with the understanding that there's no silver bullet for being secure. That said, it's not an excuse. And I think the most important thing as professionals in the industry and people who are going through the standards is doing the right things at the right time. Because most of these things, if you actually do them and follow them, it reduces that possibility of you being breached, compromised, whatever language we want to use. There will always be attacks. Let's be clear about that. It's what happens after the attack that is the most important thing. What happens? So are you breached? Are you compromised? I think that's the focus. So for instance, both certifications and both standards say you must have an incident management process if something happens, if you notice something. They also both require that you monitor continuously your assets, your critical information, your data, be it whatever, that you monitor continuously. I think where people begin to experience that challenge is dropping the ball from that continuous improvement, leaving it as a culture, doing business as usual. And it's very simple. You're going through a certification today. Somebody is asking you, before you change something on a firewall, you must take it for approval. Then 6 months down the line, you just change it. Nobody reviews if the change is okay and the impact of the change. Things like that can introduce a lot of vulnerabilities into the system that could lead to something. So it's really just making sure you follow those things as best as you can. There are guidelines to help us ultimately, apart from the reputation and the image we get of carrying a certificate and the photo ops, like Femi said. The main intent of these things is to protect your business and data. And if they are really protected, then compromises and breaches will reduce, even though you might be attacked. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Femi, can we get your insights from a client perspective? What are those measures you put?
Okay, I think looking at it again, and just to put things in perspective, there will always be incidents. And I'm saying it could be small, it could be big. The most important thing is for you to be prepared. Like some minutes ago when I had to mute myself, I had to attend to something, that's almost like an incident. So I think for me, it's critical that you're just prepared. And why I'm saying this, because I'm looking at it from the perspective of reputation that you say. If you have actually done it in a way that you're focused on protection, you won't bother yourself. All that happens is just that you can allow things to play. And why I'm saying this is because almost all the top organizations you can talk about, they've got all the resources, all the capabilities, everything they need have actually been breached or hacked, or maybe just had one incident or the other. Not to not talk of locally. I'm not saying that many organizations also in Nigeria are not top-notch or not standard, but I'm saying in terms of what you have, capacity you have, so which means this will happen. So I think the key thing is just, if you have done this, it has a way in which people can see that, no, you are really serious about this, that you're taking measures and you are taking steps to address this. I think that's what I would say. That's with regards to the question with terms to, how do you call it, repetition. And even if you notice, for PCI, the CAT scheme, if there's an incident, they will consider the fact that you're certified, look at all your process and things like that to see, you understand what I'm saying? One of the reasons, even if they're going to give you a fine or if they're going to give you what you call it, a sanction. But I think the real thing in terms of the repetition is like to see these certifications as baseline. Because don't forget that they only prescribe things based on what they've seen. And if you look at it, that's the reason why it changes. There are different versions. You've got 1.3, 2.3, 3.3, 3.4, 4.0. That's for PCI. Even for the ISO, you've got 27001, 205. You've got the 2013 now. There was stability in the 2017. Because as the C environment evolved, but sometimes you as an organization may have gone faster, or you may be behind, or you may be using some technologies which are not even described in those documents. You need to be able to define what controls or what measures you would do. Because if something happens, even if it's not prescribed, you need to have had a way to be able to address. And that's where I will mention this word, risk-based. When I say risk-based, I mean you do things based on the risks you can foresee, based on the risks you can see. So that means you handle things from that perspective. I think that helps if I actually got that question very clearly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Femi. So a very critical question now, that a very important part, all said and done, everything sounds nice. Trust me, technically, an information security guy, compliance specialist, and auditor is interested and wants to comply. But there is one critical issue, one major issue we face, and I'm sure it's in all parts of the world. I don't think it's just about Nigeria. Is how do I get my management buy-in, to support standards compliance, which is complying to these standards? How do I get their buy-in from a cost perspective, cost elements of achieving the compliance? How do I justify the cost of compliance to my management? How do I get them to see the value of these standards? I don't know where to start with.
Okay.
Mr. Aminu, go ahead.
Okay. It's an interesting question because it depends on the perspective on which you are. That's what determines how you drive this. If you are, for instance, a CBN regulated organization, I'm not sure you so much need much to show them, because often, even when the regulator sets those standards, they send it first to the executive. That's to the MD also. So it's more like something that helps you to drive it. But that doesn't now give you, what do you call it, the room to just drive it with the volume of cost. Because I've seen a lot of implementation. A lot of times I smile because you find out that different organizations with same capacity, when you compare what they spend, you find out that, wow, one spends very, very low amount and one spends very high. It's a function of choice. But I said for that first, that will help in that perspective. But if you're starting afresh, I'll say first and foremost, there's what you call projection of your job function. Because if you're driving something, people need to be able to feel you. People must know you exist. And I think the simplest way to create that is security awareness. And when I mean security awareness, when you begin to throw things to them that they can see how it applies to them, even to their own personal life. Because every one of us has something to do with information security. That's just the truth. And I'll take it from this perspective. For instance, why don't you try to do a digital footprint of your MD, just to see where he appears and all of that, and see that's the way, you're trying to create a scenario where you understand, or maybe your board members, or maybe perhaps your, your management team, or the person you report to, just to show them that, and then be able to explain. Most times it's not as if they don't want to do these things, but they don't understand. So if you can use that to sell to that, it makes it, easy. Then the other part is also, you need to also see your job, not just from the, a cost center perspective, but from a profit center perspective. And to do that, you need to have a way in which you measure things you're doing and how it translates to profit to the organization. So when you're showing them those things, when you get back, it's easier to do that. I know for some organizations, because a lot of times, even sometimes when you're bidding, some of these things are requirements. then you can mention, they begin to appreciate, oh, wow, have we gotten our certificate again because we need this for this? Because that tells the third party that, look, to some extent, I don't need to, what do you call it, worry so much. So I think those are the ways to actually do it. And then the other one is building a business case. And I think there are standard business cases that you can always get online. But the interesting thing is, like, look, people don't just listen to what you say, they listen to your body language. And your body language helps a lot in selling things. When you have opportunity to go to defend a business case, they read more of your body language, your tone and everything to be able to appreciate what this person is saying. I'm not saying you should scare them, but there are also easier ways to scare them. Look at also companies in your sector, look at companies in your area that have had this same issue, and maybe sanction happen or something happen, print it or put it as part of it. Or you are showing your boss or you are showing the management that you don't want this to happen to us. That's why you are saying this. What you are simply doing is that you are ensuring yourself on one side, because even when it happens, they will still blame you, whether you have done what you should do or not. And at the same time, you are telling them, so, okay, look, at the end of the day, it's not just me that will suffer for this. The management will be saying you need to defend this and this. And as you do those things, I believe it's become very easy to sell. In the past, I think it was really, really, really a tough sell. But now you don't hardly open the papers without hearing something about cybersecurity fraud, even though I don't agree fraud is cybersecurity, but there's so much lazy. So you see so many times, and then you've seen data breaches, or you see facts like, okay, Google again had this antitrust issue with the European Union. So all of those things, when you bring it out, you begin to share some snippet of such information before you even go for approval with your MD. Just say, okay, what's happening around us? You understand? I think all those things helps a lot to do what you need. I think I should stop at this point at this time.
You've shared a lot, from teaching us how to scale our management to also putting out data effectively to before your justification. Because the thing, I'm not sure you can take away the scare factor. It's not necessarily to scare them, but just to get them informed and let them take it more seriously and actually see the value that, what, because it has not happened, there's actual value. If it happens, then this is what it will cost us. And I can justify the fact that you have saved us a particular amount of money because incidents didn't happen, glitches didn't exist. That's what it is. So, folks, I don't know if you have anything to throw into that. How do you advise your clients, or how do you justify the investment, which is getting your clients to understand that spending this amount of money on compliance is worth it? How do you go about that?
Well, there are a couple of ways. Mr. Aminu has mentioned most of it. The most important one these days is regulatory. Somebody has asked you to do it. Maybe you're a regulatory body. So it makes the case easier where you don't do anything. But in most times, you see cases where the client asks you to help us justify. So we've worked with an organization lately that wanted to do ISO. And this organization was, how do we justify doing ISO? We feel it's something to do, but we don't know why we should do it. And one of the first things we did is, okay, what industry are you in? What customers are you serving? So how are people perceiving you? And we noticed that they are in a high touch industry in terms of they readily interface with a lot of customers and they store customers' critical data. So one of the things they use to justify it is we have a brand reputation to enhance. So if we go through this, and they decided to do ISMS, by the way, and if we do this ISMS, we enhance our brand reputation that we do cybersecurity well. We have those practices in place. We have all the controls. We followed all the domains. And for them, it was around physical and environmental security, most especially, and they wanted to show it. So they could have done ISO for environmental security, but they decided on ISMS because they also keep people's data. So that's also one of the ways around, outside of fear, outside of regulatory, is to enhance the brand reputation. The other way is from a service assurance point of view. So if I'm doing something, how does it ensure that my business continues to run? So if I do PCI, I protect my card data. So there's some aspect of resilience in there, which is also in ISMS. I'm prepared for incidents. I can respond if it happens. I can respond effectively. but my primary goal doing these things is to ensure it doesn't happen. And if you are financially savvy, you can do a little naira and kobo mathematics, that if I'm down for this period because we don't have this or we're attacked this way, this is the cost. This is the cost of the certification if we do that. If we do this because we have this in place, then you can justify it that way. It helps. That way they even see you more as a strategic or as a business enabler rather than I'm just meeting compliance.
Yeah, I think I like the last point you made, because compliance generally, running audits, especially from a cybersecurity perspective, we've always been seen as a roadblock. We're always stopping processes from running. We're always the issue why they can't go live on time. But from experience, it's always important you can position yourself as an enabler, as an entity driving the business, and you need to be able to put out effective data and processes to be able to justify that. So thank you for that input. So I would go to questions from the audience. So I'm taking the first. So guys, please, you can share your questions in the chat, and then we can start taking questions. So the first question is from Tony Laura, and his question is, with people working from home, how is PCIDSS compliance adjusting to handle processing of credit card from home? What is it to conversation?
Okay. Okay. I think I'll try and rephrase it a little, because you always use credit card more while you're at home, which is what we've seen. People tend to buy a lot more stuff. So I think it's more of how do you as an organization who is processing it ensure continuous compliance. So I hope that's the question. That's me trying to interpret it. And I think one of the effective ways is if you've put in place the normal processes or standards that are required of you. So for a company that is processing card data, you have IT people who are connecting remotely. It says you must do some basic level of things to ensure that you access your infrastructure securely. So for instance, two-factor authentication, multi-factor for those guys that administer the systems. So that's one part of it, that you ensure that you follow those processes. Also, if your infrastructure is hosted outside of your home, really, it's just to make sure that you continue to do those things from a business as usual point of view. I know an organization that during this whole COVID period, they asked some of their staff to come at certain times of the week. So they had the physical security guys were coming all the time to ensure that everything was right. The system administrators were coming at certain times. The auditors were coming at certain times and checking what the people that were around at particular times were doing. Now, if it's from, I'm trying to answer it from another point of view. So if it's from a how do I get assessed based on COVID point of view, then the PCI Council has given some steps and guidelines for assessments to be done remotely from for an organization by both the auditor and both the organization that is meant to be assessed. So it's allowed that it's done remotely if you meet certain criteria for that remote assessment. So I hope we've answered Tony's question, because it wasn't too clear, but I hope we've done justice to it.
Okay, thanks for that. Femi, do you have any variation or response to that question?
Yeah, I think Tokuma has answered, but just to add to it would just be that if actually you have done these standards, it shouldn't be different. It's just a replay, because for instance, if you did the PCIDSS, you will have scenarios of merchant, you have scenarios of third party you connect to, and that's also in the scope. So all of that will have been covered. And there will be situations for you to have technical support guy working from homes. And when I say working with VPN and working at all of those are often in the scope if they need to do things on on data security standard. That comes back again to, when the foundation is right, when you've done the proper planning and proper alignment, when those things happen, the only thing is just that your focus shifts from the premise to beyond or outside the wall of the premise. That's just the little I wanted to add. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So, so the next question is, this is from Ade Omotosho. So it says, is there a platform for information security auditors for getting community-based experience for implementation and auditing as the job experience may be tough to come by. So I think what he or she is saying is, for those that don't have experience or not on the job, is there community online, are there programs or events where they can, at least get to hear or read from experts and be able to at least balance, the fact that they don't have hands-on experience?
Okay. Okay, so personally, I know of a couple of forums. They are all different kind of forums, actually. There's the, without giving in no particular order, so it's not as if I'm giving anybody particular preference. So I know of, there's the ISC2 forum, there's the NigerSecCon forum, where people ask a lot of questions. So it's very practical in those things. So there are a lot of forums you can join. There's forums on LinkedIn as well. So for instance, when I started my, I think my security journey, and when LinkedIn started, one of the first things I did was to join LinkedIn communities around specific topics. So you have communities around audit, communities around ISMS, PCI, on LinkedIn. So there are a lot of forums, and they won't ask you to pay. So they are free forums. And if you want to go the internship route as well, there's the opportunity for internship in a lot of organizations for free if you have that bandwidth, so to speak. So I think that's the little nugget I can drop on that.
So thanks for that response. So I think the next question would be, so the next question is from Alima Tijani. She's saying, as an organization, we've said ISO PCI is essential. We've said depending on the kind of business you run, the kind of services you provide. So she's saying that for them, they don't have it. So what is the criteria? And also what advice would you give to ensure they are data compliant with NDPR? And NDPR, which is the standard from NITDA. So they've been asked to engage a reputation compliance organization. So what do they need to put in place to be able to achieve NDPR? Also, what is the criteria for, achieving ISO or PCI? Let's go forward, Mr. Aminu.
Okay, yeah, interesting question. And I think I said at the beginning about trying to align standards. There's proliferation of standards. Some of them are due to geographical reasons. For instance, data regulation is becoming something like a geographical issue that every country must have data protection. And really, I must commend NITDA for what they've done. But you also need to look at security from different perspectives. There's cyber security. People now call cyber as maybe the internet indirectly, everything connected. There's information security. When you look at information security, it goes beyond just cyber, because now you are talking about paper, printed information, and all of that. And we can begin to define things. If you talk about data security again, we cannot be, okay, data, what's data? Data starts from bits and bytes, 0 and 1 and things like that. So it flows across. But I think I like to see this thing from this perspective. Let's look at it from people, process, and technology. Every regulation drives from the process or the policy perspective. But for you to make this thing work, you could have a manual way of handling it, or you have an automated way of handling it. When it's automated, then you have technology. In that sense, it comes back to, you can't really do something like NDPR without having something like a frame of ISO or PCI. Because if you're just going to be driving it from NDPR perspective, it won't cover everything. It will help you to fulfill that regulation, but it won't cover every area. Because almost if you look at it, everything is about data. Everything is about what you call information. And it becomes easy for you to do NDPR if you already have ISO. For instance, there's actually an ISO certification for privacy, which is like a privacy SMS. I can't remember exactly, maybe it's ISO 2701. I can't remember exactly, but at least it's ISO 27 on privacy that is done, that even some of the cloud providers now are certified to that. So if you look at the NDPR regulation, you find out that there are quite a number of areas that require you to do, like for instance, encryption, pseudonymization, do a number of technologies, and you need to have those things implemented. So I will actually encourage an organization like this to just do an ISO, because when you do ISO, it helps you. And then the other area will just be the process, the areas that pertain to legal or how you drive things. And as I said, people, process, and technology. And the PCI focus on technology. The ISO also has a lot of technology. But for you to fulfill this requirement, for instance, let's look at asset inventory. Depending, thank you, sir, so depending on the size of your organization, you can't be managing all your assets on Excel. You're already using technology, you understand? If you look at it, human resource, you can't sit with human resource being manual, papers, and file. With time, you need to do maybe a cloud HR solution and an HRMS. So at that time, you begin to see that you need to actually, implement a number of solutions. So I will actually advise them to do ISO in a sense and then tie it, because you can build on it. The audit, from the NDPR perspective, the audit is actually done by an organization that just comes to audit, not implement. So when they come, they audit you, okay, do you have this, do you have this? And based on that report, they send to whoever they need to send. So if you really want to do that, I would rather tell you to rather please just do ISO, not specifically to do what you call it, payment. There are other ones, and I can let you also know for free that ISO can be in different frame. And I think maybe to also put this also in PCI, because that's the area where I said you need to know before you go for something. Most cases, people miss it from that perspective. Somebody says he wants to do PCIDSS, and he's not a level 1 merchant, and he's trying to get a QS. There are different levels. There's a PSCI, the ones that just involve questionnaires. I believe InfoPrice is good enough to tell you more on those details so that you don't get, and all of those things also impacts on your cost. And the same thing for ISMS. The truth about it is that I can do my ISMS just for a particular department. And it doesn't reduce that I have ISO, neither does it increase that someone that has done across the organization. I just need to grow that. But I'm just saying that because it helps you to understand the basic and you can focus. Otherwise, if you do NDPR this time around, I'm sure when there's another regulation from another department again, then you are thinking of this, then you are thinking of that. And you don't also want to fall into a hand of vendors. Sorry for that speak. That's just me. And when I say that, because people often want to just sell things and sell solutions, but have your own strategy and drive from that. Thank you. You are muted, Gbolabo.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you for the details. Yeah, I'm sure that was very helpful. Yeah, so they confirmed the ISO you were talking about, 27701. Thanks to Michael and Abayomi. So she responded, she gave more details. They're a manufacturing company, so they've done QMS, which is quality management, system. And so I'm sure she's taking your guidance on the next steps for them if they're looking at the NDPR standard.
Okay, can I just add something to that?
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm saying that if they've done ISO 9001, that means they have the frame clearly to what to do. So it shouldn't be difficult to now add a bit of the other one, because there's a bit we need to look at, and that's coming very well to manufacturing industries. It's very key and core abroad already now. And that's this issue of IoT. There is OT and there's IT. Now, the focus has been on IT. IT is information technology, security of information technology. That's been the focus. That's why in the financial sector, in many companies, we look at it from systems and things like that. But when you talk about OT, you're looking about connected systems. For instance, don't forget that there are controllers that drive all of this, manufacturing systems. And there have been issues of things like there's this topnet that affected, Saudi Aramco, and one of those some years past. And these things are happening very well. So as they begin to deploy IT and OT, that area is becoming very, very critical. So let's don't just assume that they are safe in that area. I'm aware of regulations for DISCO, like there's this American one on NERC also, which relates to that. That's for electricity utility companies, and there are quite a number of things. And I think it's important, and that's why I would still say it should go for something like ISO, because it covers all of those things, and those things can be embedded. You may be surprised that most of these manufacturers, like I'm trying to remember those big names that make manufacturing equipment, they always have those independent separation of their equipment. Because we're like General Electric, many of these Japanese firms that make machines, even some of these machines that are used even in the medical area, those things also impacted on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the additional details that have been shared. Okay, so we are coming to the end of the program. So let me see if there's one more question. So I think, so there have been multiple questions, but it goes in line on, so how do I convince an organization? So I think this person is service provider. How do I convince an organization on adopting ISO standards in their operations? So how do I convince an organization to, and also There's also a question on how do you, okay, I think you've touched on improving your structure and focus to reduce the need for frequent audits based on your compliance management procedures. Then also, how do you internalize the policies, processes, procedures developed and documented during compliance management? You know, it's always been an issue for organization. So if we can round off with that, how do you maintain your compliance, which is internalizing? Also, for future service providers or current service providers, how do you convince an organization to comply to the system? Okumbo, do you want to start? As we round off, so it's your finishing line.
It's a question. All right. So I think the easiest way to actually do these things is to make sure that when you are starting, you're actually starting with what you are doing. So from instance, ISO is a management system. It says, say what you do and do what you say. So if you document it, you don't need to go and take somebody else's policies and just slam it in your organization. You need to actually look at it and say, within the prescription of the framework, what am I meant to do? How do I do my own things and align it? That way, it's easier for you to continue to maintain. It's just tweaks. So it's just tweaks to your daily processes and procedures that need security embedded, rather than just taking something and doing it. Now, the other way you can also do it is revisit it constantly, which is where we have the areas of continuous improvement, which we mentioned before. And for an ISMS, where your internal auditors, if you have one, or you can engage one to now say, come and ensure that I continue to do these things, assess me. So I did the audit for a case of example. I did the audit 2 months ago, and I need to have my internal audit 3 months after, just to make sure that somebody independent, can be within the organization or outside, depending on your preference, now checks how far are you doing what you say you would do and following those processes. So those are one of the easiest ways to do it. And also, you need somebody to drive it from the top. So we usually recommend that you have a management or an executive sponsor who is interested in that initiative. So it's not just we've gotten the certificate and we close, it's still next year. That person is wholly invested in ensuring that you live that continuously. So depending on your organization, it could be anybody. Sometimes it's the CEO, sometimes it's the compliance guy, it's internal audit, but have somebody senior who is responsible, who can drive it. Don't forget, it's a management standard. So management needs to drive it from the top. You measure it, you see if there's improvement. Is it delivering the outcomes you want in terms of improving, being secure? Your security posture is maturing by the day. So that's one way. Then, of course, you can get, this is without selling, you can get an external person just to push you all the time. Check at a quarterly or a defined period of time to do that for you.
So, folks, one more question for you. It just came through, so you answer it quickly. This is the kind of question Osita will be happy about, and he knows why. Before we come to Femi to round off. Okay, so this is from Henry, and Henry's question is, my company built a cloud-based solution to handle payroll management for companies and businesses. So we don't look at data, Paystack, payment company does that. So what certification do we need to look into?
Okay, so thank you. It's a good question, but broad in the way it was framed. So like Femi has said before, you could do any certification or either of the two. You could do ISMS just to enhance your brand as a cloud-based company. You will say, I am ISO 27001 certified. So you can put that, it enhances your brand. People see it, they know you followed a minimum number of processes and procedures to do to maintain security. So you could do that. You could also do quality management to say everything we do in terms of payroll processing is also focused from a quality point of view, in addition to security. Then depending on how your card data is processed by Paystack, you might still be responsible or you might still be liable to do PCI. So there are three things you could do. It depends on what is driving it and what is your aim. What do you want to achieve from it? And if it's protection, ISMS, if it's just plain protection, ISMS is a good place to start. So.
That's good insight, good insight. Okay, so Mr. Femi, let's round off. You know, you've given us a lot of nuggets today. We just need a closing line from you to seal the day.
I think Tobo has actually answered that question, but I think internalization is a function of what you do, you own. And I think it's critical. As much as you get templates, there's nothing new really. It's also very, very critical that you know how to adapt it to your own environment. Often, somebody else's policy may be 200 pages, somebody's own may be 20, and it will achieve the same thing. Just localize whatever you're doing for your own environment and make sure you practice what you say. The interesting thing about ISO is that the auditor will always start with your own policy, not somebody else's policy. So it's almost like it's holding you to what you have done. I think that should make it very, easy to internalize. And that's why I think it's also very critical that the people driving it, you don't take for granted training. It's easy to drive what you understand. And I really, really plead that please get knowledge, understand in, and prove yourself. Because, you know, it's not just, it's what you know that you can defend. It's what you know that you can sell to the organization as a whole. I think that's basically the question. It was about, how do you call it, internalize. And I think it's also critical because a lot of things are going cloud now, that you understand that ISO or PCI can either be on premise or what, on cloud. So whatever way you want to look at it. And now I wouldn't encourage you to do anything cloud without putting security into consideration. You can outsource technology, you can outsource and purchase facilities in the cloud, but you can never outsource your risks. There's been issues regarding third party and all of that. And don't forget that first and foremost, even the cloud provider is the first third party. And the interesting thing is like all the main cloud providers have the resources. I'm sure if you check Azure, check AWS, they've got all of this certification just to start with. But sometimes depending on what you need to do, you may not necessarily also need to do the certification. But I'm sure when you consult the experts, they'll be able to tell you, okay, do you really need or not? And why I'm saying this is because for me, it's actually about putting this into practice. Certification only comes to the question when you need to validate and show that, yes, I've gotten to this particular level. So it's a journey. Don't rush it. That's what I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very much. That's a very good closing line. So, Mr. Aminu, we thank you for coming on board today to share from your vast, knowledge and experience. Tonkubo, thank you for giving us insight into what you do and how you do it. For me, it's been very, even though I'm in the sector, I'm in the industry, but it's a refresher for me too. So, giving me more insight to do my job better. And for our audience, we thank you for being here. I'm going to be passing on to Osita now to give us the closing words and to send us away. Over to you.
We had such an amazing and insightful experience at this event. And more importantly, right, I want to say thank you to everybody that joined this call. We are really indeed grateful to have you join the call. The objective for us at InfoPrive is to add value to you. And I know that 1 hour, 15 minutes is so short of a time for us to do this, to do justice in providing you with the right information. So I'm just going to ask a favor, right? I placed down my email address at the chat room, and my email address is osita@infoprive.com. My email address is osita@infoprive.com. I'll be happy and I'll be glad to attend to any of your questions. What I'll do is to point you really in the right direction. We have a lot of smart people in our organization, and we'll be willing and we'll be excited to have your questions, answer your questions. If you need a presentation for this, we're going to do a presentation. and we'll be really, really glad to have you contact us for more information and for any clarification. Once again, to everybody that joined this call, thank you so much. We look forward to your questions. And please, we're also going to be sending you some questions after now on your insight about and your feedback, rather, of this event. Please feel free to get back to us to give us any feedback at all. Like it's generally said that feedback is the breakfast for champion. So we want to get your feedback so that we can learn on how we can serve you better. Thank you for your time. We promised the event was going to end by 12:15, and this is 12:14. And I'll say at this point, thank you, everyone. Do have a wonderful day and stay blessed. And more importantly, also stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.